There are so many amazing groups tonight that we will be honoring that just people who give of their riches and their time and their dedication. Thank you for understanding that you are part of a community and that you always will be. That is one of the most wonderful things we have in New York is by living in close proximity, you always understand that you are part of a greater good, and you people profoundly do. So welcome back. We're going to continue with the with these fantastic social justice awards, and we're going to start with Vincent McGee. I feel like Vinny should be up here, sort of like a friar's roast, like just wondering what will happen at any moment. But oh, I said, well, ham. Activist and ham, Vinny McGee, exemplifies commitment to social justice. Vinny is a legend in the nonprofit world and a lifelong activist for human rights, economic justice, and nonviolence. In fact, I understand that he was in on the early conversations when the North Star Fund was first forming and has been a donor and advisor since 1981. So many of you in this room are here to honor Vinny tonight. As a young divinity student in 1967, Vinny was the first seminarian to refuse armed service in the Vietnam War. But here's what's awesome. He didn't just burn his draft card, he burned half of it. Sent the other half with a letter to Lyndon Johnson that said, "Your war, not mine, suck it." Okay, he didn't say suck it. He didn't say suck it. I added that. I added that. But it would have kind of been awesome, Vinny, if you said suck it. I gotta be honest. That is where you and I are different, as a young seminary student and me as a comedian. Vinny was drafted, refused induction, and spent a year in jail. And from prison, he continued to organize and mount a legal challenge to the war, which reached the U.S. Supreme Court 4 years later. Justice William O. Douglas dissented in support of Vinny's position that cooperation with selective service was consent to the war. He received a pardon from President Gerald Ford in 1975. Vinny's awesomeness continues, people. Oh, this is the beginning. This is young Vinny with full head of hair Vinny. Vinny chaired the board of Amnesty International USA in the early 1980s and the executive director committee of the Fund for Peace. From 1980, I know, keep clapping, Vinny. How do you do it? From 1984 until 2002, he worked closely with Irene Diamond and the foundation she and her husband founded, and yes? And together they were at the center of shaping and greatly increasing the philanthropic response to the AIDS crisis in New York City and nationally. Vinny's influence has been so strong in so many arenas that I'm thinking we make a new game, 6 Degrees of Vinny McGee. Vinny's guidance has nurtured a generation of leaders in the philanthropic and nonprofit communities. Today, he is senior advisor at the Atlantic Philanthropies, bringing his 40 years of experience in the nonprofit and foundation world to inform Atlantic social justice grant making. He is also, this is unending, he is also a board member of the Overbrook Foundation, the Sister Fund, and PATH. Next, he is also going to be on Dancing with the Stars. I'm announcing that here tonight, and it's really, really, really exciting. Are you going to kill me? For his lifetime of contributions to human rights, social justice, peace, and dancing, it is my honor to present this North Star Fund Award to Mr. Vinnie McGee.
Can you imagine all of that hype and I only have 3 minutes? Just one dancing story. First time I was in Ireland in 1962, there was a welcoming program for strangers, as they said. And a number of young people at this Catholic church hall danced and sang and so forth. And then they asked one of us from each country group that was represented to do something typical of home. So, of course, I stood up and did an Irish hornpipe and jig and whatnot that we'd learned in school from Sister Mary Joannes here in New York City. Thank you all for coming tonight and supporting this important work. I really appreciate the recognition, but even more the participation and the commitment to the work that North Star stands for. Frederick Douglass's abolitionist newspaper, the North Star, was published in 1847 in Rochester, New York. Susan B. Anthony was there a little bit later in Rochester working on women's rights. And at the end of that century, Emma Goldman led protests about sweatshops in Rochester's emerging industries. My 3 years in Rochester began working on the production line at Eastman Kodak while at night school at the university, but also learning how to become an activist. Just before my arrival in Rochester in August 1964, race riots broke out in Rochester's 3rd and 8th wards. This prompted the creation of FIGHT, Freedom, Independence, God, Honor, Today, a Saul Alinsky Industrial Areas Foundation response to the racism rampant in local industry and institutions. My feet got wet early. Work at non-union Eastman Kodak was an experiential higher education for the likes of me, juxtaposed with political work in the inner city. During the year when I became 21, 1964, and voted for the first time for the peace candidate, Lyndon Baines Johnson. At Kodak, everyone on the line, many there for decades, encouraged me and others like me to study hard and avoid the war, which their children and grandchildren were already fighting. Over coffee or lunch, we spoke of the Johnson-Goldwater election, civil rights movement, but mostly quietly and very carefully and diplomatically. However, 2 blow-ups come to mind. One, when Alex Burke, a 60-year-old something daily communicant, when he threw the local paper on my shop table one morning and said, "Look at that goddamn blank blank nun," an African-American sister, which was unusual at the time, on the front page of the local paper, leading, among others, in the Selma March. He said, "Sister should be in her convent where she belongs." Several months later, I was asked if I was the Vincent F. McGee, Jr., who had signed an anti-war ad in the Sunday newspaper. "Really?" was the calm comment when I said yes. However, the following day, the 2-block-long production line was unusually quiet and deserted at 7:15 a.m. as I walked down its long stride to put my school bag away at the end of the line. I soon discovered why it was so quiet. A white sheet was suspended from the superstructure over my desk. Commie, pacifist, go back to Russia was scrawled on it. On the desk was a large can of benzene and a box of wooden matches. The adjacent work areas were full of my watching co-workers. You can imagine the conversations over the following days and weeks. They were the key elements in my education as a budding activist for peace and social justice, struggling to bridge the gaps, supporting me as a student to avoid the war, but frustrated and angry at the same time. The personal story moved along. Some of you here tonight, family and friends, visited me in jail. Others of you shared the work against the Vietnam War. I had fun a few weeks ago meeting Lawrence Bennetson for the first time and telling him of my role in getting his father on Nixon's enemy list, along with several other business executives for Vietnam peace, including Daniel Rose, who's here, Louis Coleman and John Tishman, who aren't here but supported the event this evening. I was executive director of this group of business executives and did their lobbying in Washington. That group also included Alfred Slaner, with whom I later worked as a fellow board member of the Fund for Peace. Some of Alfred's family is here, longtime supporters of the North Star Fund. The point I want to make as a foundation executive, somebody been involved in moving loot over all these years, is that many of these business executives supported the voices of young people and others opposed to the war and working for racial and economic justice at home. And this was 40 and so years ago, when it wasn't as popular as a business executive to be doing these things. Later, they supported early work in human rights and progressive politics and funding ideas and learning about justice and equality. In a real way then and now, we were all following the North Star, searching for it in the context of real lives and real communities. We struggled to find justice and dignity for all and following that star as a beacon of hope. This is the work we share tonight and which we must continue and expand. Time and again, work in communities most affected and in need does not move forward because funding is not easily available. Yet it is the voice of people in the community that legislators must hear and follow. Think of what has happened recently when legislators at home on recess were called to task about their challenges to Medicare. Maybe they were conservative voices that were arguing. But yes, those voices in the community achieved a quick backtracking, quote, until after the 2012 elections from the Republican leadership. This is the type of giving forward we should be doing to support communities concerned about the substance and the balance and the integrity of the American dream going forward. This is what North Star is all about. And I'm proud and honored to be part of that struggle, and I urge all of us to continue it and dig deeper into our pockets to keep it going. Thank you very much.
Vinnie McGee. Thank you. Not just for everything. You know, it's amazing generationally how we get to meet people who fought a struggle that's can be very different than the one that we fought now. I had the good fortune about 15 years ago when Dave Dellinger was traveling, touring his book From Yale to Jail. He crashed on my couch with Marv Davidoff, an old activist from Minnesota, came out, and his book publishing company gave him a hotel room. And I said, Dave, why are you staying at my apartment on my pull-out futon in Chelsea? And he said, because I constantly need to know what the young activists are thinking about. And that is really what it's all about, is when we grow and we get older and we keep looking at how the problems evolve, we have to constantly ask ourselves the question, who are we in touch? Who are we reaching out to? And are we planning on passing the baton? Is that part of our plan? And it needs to be. So just keep that in your mind all the time, because it's a new movement with a whole new set of thinking, and it involves a lot of fun. And Vinny. I just want to see if you're paying attention, Vim.